Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of the Poetry Box Live. I'm Shawn Aveningo Sanders, and I'll be your host for tonight's show. And for those of you who may be joining one of our shows for the very first time, my husband Robert and I run a small independent publishing company here in Portland, Oregon, known as the Poetry Box. And tonight we have a very special show to launch the recent publication of Uprooting, Leaving the Abuse Cycle, which is an anthology / self-help book on the topic of domestic and sexual abuse, curated by Jade, Rosina, McCutcheon, and Kristin Thomas. We are featuring 13 contributing writers who will bravely be sharing their personal poems, artwork, and essays, and then we will follow them up with everybody who signed up for the open mic portion of the show. I do want to go over a few things about how the show will proceed. The poets will be reading in order that they appear in the book. So those of you who do have a copy of the book can follow along, as I will mention the page number along with their poem title when I introduce each reader. So before I introduce Jade and Kristin, I just wanted to take a moment to share with you what it's meant to me to publish this very important work. Like so many women in our country, in the world, I too was a victim of sexual assault. When I was a sophomore in college, I was attacked by 4 fraternity brothers, and I was raped. One of them was someone I trusted as a dear friend. I kept the secret hidden for decades. But once I started sharing my story and wrote my own book about the incident, I learned how freeing it could be to share my truth and how important it is to build a bond with other women with a similar trauma. There is so much empowerment in creating art from traumatic events. It really releases the power that these monsters can hold over us. I'm so proud to be a part of this project and to help other women gain strength from sharing their stories. I want to thank Jade and Kristin and all the brave women in this book for trusting me to publish this book and to help them break the silence and leave this ugly cycle of abuse. And so without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce one of the curating editors of Uprooting, Jade Rosina McCutcheon, to share some startling statistics, the inspiration behind Uprooting, as well as reading Portia Nelson's poem, an autobiography in 5 short chapters, which is from the memoir, There's a Hole in My Sidewalk, and was used as the framework of this anthology. Please welcome Jade McCutcheon.
Thanks so much, Shawn. So I've spent most of my life witnessing the abuse of women and girls, working as a youth worker, social worker, teacher, and healer. And I've always been horrified by the general attitude towards women, particularly by certain groups of men in power, men and women, I should say, in power. The legal system appears to support men more than women and often demonizes the woman surviving the abuse. And I think in my work with Sable House, that's the thing that has distressed me the most, is the legal system and how skewed it is. This all must change. We can use our voices in many different ways to bring this appalling situation to light. This collection of poetry, art, and writing by survivors of domestic and sexual abuse is a work of love by all involved. Abuse of women is still with us, largely due to the very great power of silence. The more we speak out, the more attention this issue receives. As editors, Kristin and I have divided the book into 5 chapters based on Portia Nelson's poem, an autobiography in 5 chapters. Each chapter is a stage of the cycle of uprooting and breaking free from this cycle and patterns of abuse. Yes, we might fall into the hole in the sidewalk 3 times, but the 4th time we walk around it, and the 5th we choose another street. The contributors to this book are an exciting mix of never having been published and award-winning established poets and artists. We're deeply thankful to each contributor for speaking out. We also give thanks to Sable House and all the amazing women who work there and those who use Sable House as a resource. It's our intention that this book is useful to all who read it, whether it's just a reminder you aren't alone or that the helpful resources in the back are useful to you on that level. So some statistics. More than half of Oregon's female population, that's over 1 million women or girls, have been sexually assaulted. That alone should make everybody get to it and sort this out. More than a third of Oregon women have faced domestic violence. In 2019, sexual violence impacted over 40% of American women in their lifetimes. Only 310 out of every 1,000 sexual assaults are reported. There are over 463,000 rape victims in America each and every year. And when we consider only a third are reported, 90% of adult rape victims are women. So these statistics tell us that violence towards and against women is not only a major concern in our culture and society, but that it is ongoing and increasing. Why are these statistics so high? Why doesn't our education system address this issue and teach children about equality and respect throughout the school years? Why can't women who are being abused get any help from the legal system? Could law schools consider training specialists in sexual abuse, domestic violence, and rape? Could police training include specializing in these areas also? Could the government commit a lot more funding to these areas? We shall not stop working towards change at the deepest core of our culture. And I'm going to read the poem, an autobiography in 5 short chapters by Portia Nelson. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I fall in. It's a habit. But my eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jade. Thank you for all the work you're doing to help women. I know you're doing so much. I swear to God, every time I hear those statistics, I mean, how many times have I read these numbers going over this book, and they still shock me every time. They break my heart, and I can't believe it's getting worse instead of better. It's scary, but we have to keep fighting the good fight, and thank you for everything that you're doing. Now let's hear from Jade's co-editor, Kristin Thomas, about what working on this important project has meant to her.
So thank you, Jade, for all of your words and comments and statistics. And I guess what I'd like to say is I would like to introduce myself. I'm Kristin Thomas. I'm a mother to many and a grandma to many more. And when Jade first approached me about working on this project, I didn't know if it was a good idea for me. I hadn't edited anything beyond a work email, and I was only 2 years into my freedom and standing on shaky legs. but something about this work called to me and drew me in. So I did what I always do when I'm making a decision. I started with the simple definitions. Abuse, to treat with violence, especially regularly or repeatedly. Domestic violence and sexual violence happens every minute of every day. It does not discriminate based on your gender, your income, your education, your social status, or even your age. It can destroy your body and your mind and your spirit. And if you're lucky, you're left alive to suffocate in the aftermath. Victim, a person harmed, injured, or killed as a result of a crime, accident, other event, or action. So often, survivors are forced to relive and retell details of their abuse to law enforcement, lawyers, judges, every graphic detail. And then we wait to be judged first. Was the violence we experienced enough to qualify as abuse? And if it was considered abuse, do we qualify as a victim? More often than not, we don't qualify. Cases are dismissed on a technicality, and abusers are acquitted. Survivor, a person who survives, especially a person remaining alive after an event where others have died. As survivors, we're forced into the unknown. We don't recognize the terrain and we don't speak the language. And along the way, we might learn that leaving was the easy part. It's the staying gone and healing that might test every ounce of your faith, drain you of every resource, challenge you to exercise your primal instinct to protect your young, to own your place in the universe, finally. Thrive, to grow or develop well, to prosper, to flourish. This work of art is a collective testimony outlining the journey of not only surviving, but thriving. Because for me, to thrive is to live the most free, loving, beautiful life I could ever imagine. And it's full of women who have made it to the other side. We are your sisters. We are your guides. We are your safe place. Find us. We are here. It is my pleasure and absolute honor to share works from Uprooting, Leaving the Abuse Cycle with you this evening. Thank you.
Oh, Kristin, yes, yes. We are all sisters here. And that was really quite moving. I'm so glad that you're free and you look like you're doing really well. You look like you're thriving. And this whole idea that we must qualify to be a victim is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. But thank you so much for sharing that really, really moving opening for us. Before we begin hearing from our featured readers, I thought it'd be nice to take a look at the artwork for the cover of the photo of the book. So let me share my screen here. So as you can see here, we have Rmae's wonderful artwork titled Silence. It's quite powerful, and it was obviously the natural choice to use for the Uprooting book cover. It speaks to the multitude of emotions and voices in our head and how women have been silenced for much too long. So now let's hear from the artist Rmae about her amazing piece.
Hello, everybody. And first, I want to say I fully agree with what you ladies have said on everything so far. And I also share that gratitude of being able to experience this being published. And so when I was thinking about, okay, like, how am I going to like explain this artwork, I was like, okay, I ramble. I have ADHD and everything else, so sometimes I ramble, so I wanted to make certain points. It is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I also um, have a trauma anniversary coming up from when my life was almost taken. And so the timing of this is very freeing. And this is like good, like freeing emotions. It's not like overwhelmed, like sad. This is like proud, because I am the kind of person who does not like limelight. I don't, that's just not me. If I could be a ghostwriter and have that be my career and do that, I would love to do that and just not have to talk about it, just be about it and let people experience it. That's what I would do. So the same kind of for my artwork. But when Jade approached me with this, like it started off with a different painting at first of just being added into the book. And then I shared what's on the cover now with her and was like, hey, I got some other stuff, because she knew that I wrote as well. And so I had offered some other poems too, and was like, hey, I got this. And my making this, the timing was aesthetically, first in my art adventure, I was experiencing with like whimsical faces. I had never done like faces and stuff like that. It's always been like art, like abstract or animals or nature or stuff like that. So it was just in the start of that. And so I had just started playing around with this, and it was right after I had to flee from my home 1,000 and something miles away to Oregon here. And I had met Jade through going through the shelter. And I had just gotten a realization. I was settled in my apartment from, my first yeehaw, good job moment, getting out the shelter, getting into my place. And I hadn't done art for like a little while. And so I started this, and I was flooded because during this time also the Me Too movement was going on. And so a lot of, everywhere around us, it was in the news, so many famous people coming out with all these things that they had been through. And so that's where kind of the silenced theme of this came forth, because I was really feeling that I had to leave my home. We experience it even with the abusers, like their families. Sometimes they won't hold accountabilities, and those are ways that we're like silenced, um, because they're not there to like stick up, or they won't believe it, or support you. It's like you're X'd from that whole support system. And so some of the graffiti stuff in the background, you know, or all those terms and things that some of them, like love bombing, those are silent type of abuse. Gaslighting, those are, you know, in the line of domestic violence, because those are tactics, manipulative tactics and different maneuvers that the abusers use to keep us isolated, to keep us in that state of fear and control. And those things, you know, they do those because they know that it's not something you can see. You know, you can't physically see gaslighting. You know, it might show in as far as like your emotions, but it's not something that, you know, I would be going out and somebody would say, hey, you know, even spit on, you know, that's a personal one. People disregard those kind of things too. That's assault. And that is a type of abuse as well. And I've heard so many stories of that, you know, devaluing. And when someone's being so devalued, it causes you to be silent. So it's just a mixed media piece. And then I also have, of course, the, you know, hope and stuff on there too. And yeah, it's just a mixed media piece. I love collage art. I feel like that's a good way. Like, you don't really have to be an artist to do collage art. And graffiti art. I've loved graffiti art since being a kid. It mixes words and art. So yeah, that's that. I hope. One thing I did want to hit first, real quick, because I did want to say this. When I did actually finish it, and what made me finish it, I was watching the news and I heard this statistic, and it was about strangulation, and that is so important too. I feel like in getting certain messages about domestic violence, because that is a very personal thing. But some of the things that they did in statistics, it goes back to show some important things that I feel like need to be paid attention to. But this one particular, she's a coordinator for SANE, which it's in Albuquerque, and it's sexual assault nurse examiners. And she had said that anyone that has survived a strangulation attack from their abuse, 750% more of a chance of being murdered by that assailant, and within a year. That statistic blew me away. 750%. Like, you can't get any higher than that. So yeah, that's hearing that statistic really resonated with me, because I had been so dissociated from what I had gone through, and that's what helped me finish the actual artwork. And yeah, so
Well, thank
there
you
you
so
go.
much, Rachel. Thank you for sharing all the story behind that piece of art. It is powerful, and we're all loving the fact that you did include the word hope in there with all the rest of it. It really it's really powerful. So thank you so much for that.
Thank
Next
you.
we're going to hear from Shannon Rose Riley, and she's going to be reading her essay, The 10 Years War, on page 21.
Thank you, Shawn, and greetings, everybody. Can you hear me all right? I have to take my glasses off to read this. Okay. I find, by the way, I haven't shared this story a lot, and I have only read it in this version to a small group of people that I am close with, so I may get nervous while reading it now. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who swore revenge against her father. She was just 5 years old. What caused his anger that night, she wasn't sure, but she knew her father had been very drunk, the kind of drunk that made his eyes appear deeper in his skull, wet with the color of blood, the kind of drunk that turned him into a raging monster. It must have been around her bedtime because she was pretending to sleep on the little cot in the corner of her parents' bedroom. Her mom and dad were also in the room, standing by their bed, silhouetted by the lights on the nightstands. "You're lying. You're a liar." "I'm not lying, John, I swear." "Why were you there? Why were you talking to him?" "I didn't." Her words were swallowed up by the vicious blow that landed across her face. Blood sprayed from her mouth. She tried to leave the room, but he was hot on her heels. As she ran down the hallway towards the front door, he swung at her from behind. Following behind him was the little girl, screaming at the top of her lungs, "Daddy, please stop it." "Where are you going? Are you trying to run to him?" "John, please stop." Levine had opened the front door, and he lunged forward to grab the top of her beehive hairdo. He pushed forward, tackling her to the ground outside the apartment door. She screamed at the top of her lungs as his full body weight fell upon her. He scrambled up quickly in spite of being so drunk and proceeded to drag her down the stairs to the front of the building by her hair. "John, please. Daddy, stop it." By now, neighbors furtively poked heads outside of cracked doors, closing them again just as quickly. Someone yelled down from the second floor, "Keep it quiet." But no one did anything to help her, except the little girl. She didn't run away. She didn't leave her mom's side, and she kept yelling at her dad to stop. Suddenly, he did stop. The girl saw a strange look of surprise on his face, as if he'd just arrived in the hallway and wasn't sure what was going on. Perhaps he was afraid someone had called the cops. Perhaps his daughter's cries had snapped him out of it. All the little girl knew was that the punching and pulling of hair had stopped. She looked at her mom, whose face was tear-stained and bloodied, her lips swollen and cracked, her green eyes puffy and dark, her beehive completely undone, clumps of red hair on the carpet in the hallway. His rage had subsided just enough for the little girl to get her mom back into the apartment. She walked her to the bedroom and told her that it would be okay, but as soon as the words were out of her mouth, he was running back in behind them, worked up again. And once again, John began to hit Levine in the face and head with the very fists that had won him a Golden Gloves boxing prize at age 16. The little girl had had enough and began to hit and kick this man, her father. She didn't care anymore if she was supposed to show respect, if she was supposed to love him. She punched him as hard as she could with both hands, using the fists that he himself had taught her to make, and he turned around suddenly. He looked down at the tiny girl and her small fists pummeling him, and he laughed. He laughed at her and spun her around by one arm, spanked her ass, and told her to get into bed. His laughter was sickening. It was as if he was proud to see his daughter punching him, using her fists, as if he were happy to send her back to bed, happy in his power. As she lay on her little cot in the corner of the room, she felt the sting of that laughter and the powerless shame of being sent to bed. She watched him through her fingers as he continued to hit her mother. She heard the sobs. She heard the begging. And she promised herself right then and there that she would get even one day and that she would save her mom. It would take 10 years to make good on that promise. I am that little girl.
Oh, Shannon, that's quite a story. And well, your mom's really lucky she had such a strong little girl. And I'm glad you were able to make up on your promise. That was really, really beautiful.
Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Next up, we have Dale Champlin reading her poem, This Charming Man, on page 24.
Oh, I didn't know this would affect me so much. I think it might be harder to observe someone else being injured. This charming man, every gesture he makes is full of music. He's so handsome and rich. He says, let's go to a party, but won't take you home when you want. Or let's take a walk down by the shore, and he holds your hand too tightly, except you're embarrassed and don't want him to get the wrong impression. So you go along. The entire coastline stuck in your throat. You don't trust him completely, afraid he might knock you down, and he does. Suddenly you hear your ankle rip, the ligaments torn by his weight crashing down full force, and you don't grimace or cry out, telling yourself, this time will soon be over. And time does jump forward. He lets you out of his car, where you limp to your door, but your ankle will never be the same.
Thank you, Dale, for sharing that. This is really a yeah, powerful poem, powerful story. Next up, we have Sherri Levine reading Face Down on page 25.
Thank you, Shawn. Thank you, Jade. Thank you, Kristin. Thank you, everybody in this virtual room. I wrote this poem, Face Down, and I won an award for it, but I've always been afraid to read it out loud. So here it goes. Face down. He untucks his shirt, pulls down his zipper, pushes my head on his lap. To me, it looked like the neon pink monster sea worm I once saw in a magazine. Penis worm, they called it, undulating at the bottom of the sea. Its dimple-eyed body pulsated like my mother's twisted blue veins. What would it be like to float on the surface, face down, without sinking? Arms loose and long, would I hear the sound of my heart beating? Now, with my head still pressed down by his football hands, breath no different than the one that carries me to the other side. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherri. And I certainly understand how hard that was to read. I'm so glad you shared it with us tonight. Next up, we have Kristin Thomas reading In Public on page 29.
Before I read In Public, I'd like to share that I believe there is an ill-conceived notion in our society that violence happens when the abuser loses control, when they lose control of their emotions, or lose control of their anger, or lose their minds for a minute. But if the violence they inflicted was justified, why wasn't it done for the others to see? In Public by K. Thomas. He is always in control. He doesn't lose control of his temper or lose control of his emotions. Because if he lost control or lost his temper, he would have beat your ass standing in the Walmart checkout line when the grocery bill was $2 higher than what he allowed. But he waited until you were alone. He would have shoved and slapped you at the family barbecue, calling you a whore. when you hugged your favorite uncle, but he waited until you were alone. He would have kicked you in the stomach in the hospital exam room when the chlamydia he gave you was his proof of you cheating. But he waited until you were alone. And he would have grabbed you by the hair and called you a stupid cunt in front of his coworkers when the sandwich you made him didn't include fucking pepper jack cheese. But he waited until you were alone.
Wow, Kristin. That was powerful. And that's a really quite a valid point you make about the excuse of, oh, I just lost control, but yet it's always in
No.
private.
No.
That's
I don't.
that's so true. So thank you so much for sharing that. Next up, we have Candice Campo reading 2 poems on unprocessed trauma on page 30 and hairline break on page 34.
Thank you all. Hi there. Unprocessed trauma. She knew it would not be too long before she felt it again. The heavy feeling. A dirty, soaked washcloth, balled up in the corner, spreading mold in the shower stall of her soul. Hairline break. Sometimes I can feel it. The weight, the tangled entrenchment of confusion, swirled within longing, planted and tended to by my subconscious. An innate growth that peeks out from underneath the fragile surface when a hairline break occurs.
Thank you so much, Candice, for sharing both of those poems. Well, now we're moving on to chapter 2. And the abuse still has a stronghold, and we want to deny it's happening. First up, we have Kristin Thomas reading Less on page 38.
Okay, so before I read this poem, I would like to take a moment to honor and recognize survivors of intimate partner or marital rape. Those who have survived somebody else's misplaced ownership of your body. It's not okay. And I see you. Less by Kate Holmes. His hands slide across my ass, and it wakes me up from my foolish sleep. In my cotton armor, I convince myself I'm safe, lying in sweaty slumber. His hands slide between my legs. My body is naked to his touch. My armor pushed away. I drift away in my mind, keeping time to a broken rhythm of bed springs. His body slides off mine, and I am still less than I was before.
Thank you, Kristin, for another powerful piece. I don't even know what to say. I'm just really glad that you got out of that situation. Really glad.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Dale Champlin reading That Night on page 39.
That night, there's nothing to be afraid of, he told the little girl. I'm your brother, after all, your reflection in the mirror, your bookend. Come and sit on my quilt, and I will tell you a bedtime story. Listen to the rain on the roof, how the wind thrashes the leaves. My hands will keep you warm. Put your face near mine so I can smell your breath. Put your feet between my thighs and don't call for mother. She doesn't want to hear you snivel. Come under the covers and lift up your nightie just so. I will rock you to the patter of acorns hitting the roof. Don't worry, it's just an owl hooting in the tree outside the window. That screeching you hear is only a branch needling the window pane.
Jesus, Dale. Thank you. Thank you. Next up, we have Marilyn Johnston reading To You, My Sister on page 41.
So I thank all of you for this, and Kristin and Jade for wanting this to be part of the collection initially, and Shawn for including it among these wonderful poems. The poem I submitted was it was personal in that it's about a very good friend that I grew up with and somewhere lost her when our paths diverged. To you, my sister, like a head bowed at the foot of a coal shrine, you could see inside the grave of an unknown god, eyes trapped in sulking anger, like dried up pools after a summer of no rain. You were so alive once. As girls, we played and laughed until our mothers threatened to separate us. Before you became a puppet they carved of you, someone else beside your song, your voice far away. It's late, but everything after that came next. The crystal meth road you drove, the soulless men you trusted, the swallowed lies. Your dreams, swept up like hard pebbles, first were strewn, then formed boulders between us, cutting off the path. We once pledged, let's be the same wound if we must bleed. But then your cuts opened deep and could not heal. They left you raw, gone.
Thank you, Marilyn. You know, it's one thing to write about our own experiences, but to have such an empathetic and compassionate heart as you, I know you do, to write such a moving piece about your dear friend. I'm so sorry that happened to your friend, and I'm so sorry that you lost touch. I know you were a good friend. We're moving on to chapter 3, where we're learning how to get out of that hole just a little bit. We're going to start off with Diana Blackstone-Helt reading What He Doesn't Know on page 44.
This angry shove is familiar to her. So is this pain echoing along her spine as she tumbles into the bathtub. It's a lot like the pain she tried to forgive and forget when her back slammed against the bedroom door some weeks ago, the last time he promised never again. The same enraged eyes glare at her. The same mocking voice hurls its venom. But suddenly, somehow, this time is different. In the mirror behind him, she gazes into the tired eyes of a woman who looks like her, but is not her. It's someone else. And she knows for the first time that woman can be free. What he doesn't know, what he can't possibly know, is what happens when she's no longer afraid. When her fear turns to contempt. At that moment, each shove, each slap, each punch only feeds her power until she's ready to fly away. Then he will assault the air and it will recoil, bam, right between the eyes. His angry words will become bitter vines, imprisoning him in a poison green cell of his own making, and she'll know she can't rescue him, even if she wanted to.
And nor should she. Thank you, Diana. It's kind of one of those turning points we have when we finally had enough and turn that anger to empowerment. Next up, we have Sherri Levine reading A Kind of Disaster on page 48.
There's a lot of domestic violence in my house. And I think as a witness, as a little girl witnessing this, it's really affected my whole life. A kind of disaster. I've known earthquakes in my home, pots being thrown, plates crashing into one another, drapes closing in the afternoon. I felt the boom, boom above my bed and watched my dolls shake their heads. I don't know what it must have felt like afterwards, what she must have felt. I never got to see her exhausted mess on the floor. Still, I lay waiting for something to happen or change, for her to come and get me so I could hold her. Thank you.
Oh, Sherri, that was beautiful. That ending, how you wanting to comfort her. That's really, really beautiful. Next up, we have Susan Woods Morse reading Exposed on page 52.
Yeah, this poem came from two sources. We used to go and watch salmon spawning on a river, the McCutcheon River, and then from article I read about a young woman who had experienced gang rape. So this is Exposed. Black crows wheel and scream along with red-tailed hawks overhead. Early November mornings, the fish fulfilling their inescapable destiny. And I remember a poem I once read. In it, a girl writes of gang rape and visualizes dying salmon, Pacific salmon with delicate insides exposed. Years ago at the McCutcheon River, we watched them scatter useless seed in their final frenzy, trying to fling themselves up and over the fish ladders, thrashing, pink, bloated, with grayed lips and underbellies. Their silence and the water's silence sharply punctuated by the thrust of the excited onlookers cawing, ready to pounce on any remains. The salmon ascending and dying all at once. I think that is what she meant. And I think she was a survivor. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. The salmon. Wow, what a powerful metaphor for that. That poem really gets me really deep level. I accidentally skipped somebody, so I want to go back and pick up Kelly Morehouse reading her poem, A Heart Wildly Pounding, on page 49.
Thank you. I just want to say that thank you for all the people that did put their work together in this book, and the opportunity I had to do that, because it really helps me move through the trauma of and find words, even though these words are the closest words I can find. Okay. A heart wildly pounding. The feeling came to me waking this morning of my childhood years, not in technical terms, not literal, but a sense of slipping through a parent's hand in midair, an accident, like a fragile egg about to hit the floor. The moment where the heart is pounding, not like an egg either, because I never hit the floor, but like being high up in the sky and dropped from a jet plane, followed by the long descent down, the fall spanning a lifetime, falling and falling, flailing and possibly dying at first in the very cold atmosphere, until I revive on the long tumble down. There is nothing, and nobody but mouthfuls of empty air for years of perpetual falling, all behind the scenes I invented to survive. I cannot find the ground until the ground finds me. It's a parent holding on until they no longer do. As far as I see in my bloodline, each child is dropped, as much as no one ever planned to do so. My mother and father dropped their descendants as they themselves were dropped. In turn, my siblings dropped descendants, and I am no exception. None of us see ourselves in the downward plight, numb to our heart wildly pounding. Thank you.
Oh, Kelly, I wish I could give you a big hug right now. Please consider yourself hugged.
Thank you. Yeah, I consider it. Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to chapter 4, so we're going to look at another piece of art first. So here we have another work of art by the wonderful Rmae, titled Eyes Over Cloud, and it welcomes the reader into chapter 4 of the book, showing us hope to overcome the dark cloud of abuse and trauma as we as survivors become stronger and learn to walk around that hole in the sidewalk. So now let's hear from that artist, Rmae. She's going to be reading her poem, Recovery, on page 59.
Thank you. So that was the first artwork that Jade had, what got me into the book and everything like that. And I made that for her. So that's my love language. I love to just paint things, do art, and give them to people who either notice it and say this, impacted me or whatever. I love to just gift art, or if someone's done something meaningful or whatever for me, I love to give artwork. And this particular one I did because in coming to, having to flee and then being in the support groups and stuff, it was like me literally, kind of peeking in on a different world that I could have, like a peace and like, almost kind of like literally like, is it okay to come out? You know what I mean? To come out into the world after being emotionally held hostage, because of the domestic violence and situation that I had been through. So, peeking over that cloud is exactly that, just kind of peeking into a different world and possibilities of freedom and peace. Okay, so this poem is called Recovery. And I can relate to how a couple of you have said you're nervous and you haven't shared your work or read things or maybe had people read things. So minors are there too. Although I've been writing since like second grade, this is new for me. So here we go. There's no love left here, only a void that lingers. Things seem to move fast once your calluses are discovered from all the mental stingers. I started to plot my escape the first time my face caught the backside of his fingers. Across my face, penetrated my bubble space. Lightheaded, adrenaline rush, my heart begins to race. Fight or flight, my thoughts can't keep the pace. Assumptions are re-victimizing. Thoughts it should be easy. Call police. Restraining orders. Self-defense with guns or mace. You have no idea the grooming and narcissistic demand that's taken place. The crawling back, begging with fake tears that are supposed to erase. The scars they dealt, physical and the heartfelt. Seems I'd rather take the fist than an emotional welt. Tolerance becomes the norm. Chest tightening, squeezing like the notches on a belt. Time doesn't heal or make you forget, especially when they still haunt your every move. Their ego is stripped. They've got a lot to prove. They never sacrifice if to them it don't behoove. It takes a while to recover from all the normal things they disapproved. Please know, you can and you will get your power back. Keep fighting for your life and sanity, even when there's no one there to catch the slack. Jehovah God made you, and you're worth it, no matter how many odds are stacked. Thanks.
Bravo, Rachel. Bravo. You did it. I'm very proud of you. We're all proud of you. So now we're ready to move on to chapter 5, where that hole is no longer an issue. We are now walking down a new street. Woohoo! First up, we have Summer Harlan reading Hindsight on page 64.
And thank you for everyone who has shared. And thank you, Jade and Kristin and Shawn. Hindsight. When did I drink the Kool-Aid, lose sight of truth, disconnect from reality? I was a child. Now I am capable. Watch me grow. Watch me succeed with my children beside me, secure in our new reality, connected to truth, detoxing the bullshit.
Bravo, Summer. Let's all detox the bullshit. Well done. Next up, we have our lovely Jade reading Roots on page 66.
Roots. I am standing on dry land. I can help you from here. It's no good if I jump into the sea with you. We might drown each other, thrashing our arms, trying to keep heads above water. My feet are like roots into the ground. I can guide you back. Shout your name, shine a light. Remind you what earth looks like, feels like. You don't have to be lost at sea forever.
Thank you, Jade. Everyone needs somebody like you in their corner. So last up, I'm going to share my poem from the book. It's called There Will Be Days. There will be days. A trigger will transport you where you didn't plan to go. Scent of juniper wafting from your in-laws' hedge while visiting their mountain home. You recall gin is made from juniper berries, which reminds you of sloe gin. And then you remember the smell of his breath. The accidental scrape of fingernail against a crisp white linen tablecloth elicits synaptic electricity, a snap, and suddenly it's your fingernails scraping the bedsheet, clawing the dark, trying to escape. Careless Whisper plays on the car radio, and as much as you love George Michael, you change the station. This song, a painful reminder of that empty bottle of sleeping pills and the belief you're never going to dance again. But there will be many days when happiness persists. The wonder in your son's eyes meeting his twin baby sisters, how he slips into that big brother role in an instant, picking up a baby bottle to help with the feeding, and you kiss his tiny blonde head. The cleverness of twin little girls the night they move a mattress into the hallway outside your bedroom, perhaps to be closer to you, perhaps just to prove they can. You trip over the mess, ready to scold them. Their giggles become contagious, and you can't help but join the laughter. There will be home runs, blue ribbons, birthdays, family reunions, weddings, graduations, school plays, prom dresses, soccer games, old friends, new friends, celebrations, new jobs, new houses, promotions, new dreams, new life, new loves, and grandchildren. And through it all, you will rediscover yourself, your purpose, your essence, your sexuality, and finally realize how beautiful you are, how strong you always have been, and how to accept love from a man who never once asked what you were wearing. Thank you. So now it's time to move on to our open mic readers. Well, we are going to move on to Joan McCulloch.
Thank you for doing this, Shawn. It's been such an evening. Wow. I can speak now. A friend called. She had news. Your body, blitzed by Agent Orange, had its last flight. We hadn't spoken since the divorce, both of us remarried, on parallel paths, never crossing. You'd been laid to rest as taps played, forever facing sunrises. Veterans Day, Christmas, Memorial Day, your birthday. I leave flowers, wreaths. The east wind bites, stings with memories. We carried our old picnic basket, the one with summer, to our favorite forest outpost. Played backgammon, watching blues and gray layers intermingle, becoming a sea sky quilt. A brief contentment until the holidays. You retreated, hunkered down in a duck blind. Winter, night terrors, door slamming, yelling. I backed away from you, a viper, within striking distance. Other times, vicious fangs lashed out, its venom paralyzing our words. A direct hit, our last Christmas. Rain pelting, you raging, I left. This winter, the veil of time opens, inviting me to a decade you will never reach. Our old picnic basket is in the car, ready for donation. Inside it, your hunting boot, the backgammon game, our last conversation.
Thank you so much, Joan, for sharing that. That's quite something. I want to make sure we have time for all of our open mic readers. So I'm going to move on to the next reader. And we have a Cassandra Sumner, who I think is also a contributor in the book. So we should have had her feature earlier, but I'm glad she's here now.
Thank you. Hopefully I read loud enough and everybody can hear me. So, new growth. I heard my name in the echoes. I was fighting in the mud, stuck in the undertows. Like a lamp for my ears, I knew I was near, straining each time I broke free to hear. Your strong roots are safely in place, a beacon in the stark and confusing space. I can see you now. I am learning how. I can feel the dry land and you reach out your hand. I will add to the loudness of the light to shine the names of all so lost in the night. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Cassandra. Next up, we have Sue Lick.
Okay, hi. This is called Ex-Boyfriend. I was his trained seal, his puppy doing tricks. I was his little whore, and he was my pimp. After hauling me into bed behind the accordion divider, he'd call me out, sore and wet, half-dressed, to sing and play my guitar, do a little song for his friends, while he sipped his drink and beamed with pride at the pussy he had caught and trained to sit, stand, lie down when he called, and to sing, sing, sing. Oh, isn't she cute, he said. Now, darling, fill my glass. Until the day I closed my case and took my show back on the road. Thank you.
Way to take your show back on the road, Sue. You go for it. You go. Next up, we have Tara Carnes.
I'd like to share a poem entitled, But They Don't Fall Down. My ex sent me a drunken email at 2 a.m. and copied our judge. He called me a weeble, among other things, for my refusal to stay down after repeated legal punches. I printed a picture of weebles and glued it to my hero's poster collage, where Gandhi walks, Rosa Parks sits, Malala speaks, Mother Teresa touches, Corrie ten Boom hides, MLK marches, Sacagawea leads, Joan of Arc charges, Hildegard sings, Nelson Mandela forgives, Crazy Horse fights, Julian of Norwich guides, Philippine Duchenne teaches, Joan Chittister preaches, Arab Spring protesters shout, Burmese monks challenge, DC Mayor Bowser paints Black Lives Matter, and a lone Chinese student stares down a tank in Tiananmen Square.
May we all be weebles that cannot stay down. Thank you, Tara. I just have to say this, Tara wrote a really powerful book about escaping abuse and other women's stories called Built to Last. It's really a powerful chapbook. So I encourage you to check it out. And last up, we have Mary Pat Donegan. Is Mary Pat still here?
Yes, yes, I am. I'll share this. I've been very moved and very much related to many of the poems that were read so bravely and courageously. Thank you all. And I chose this one of my many poems about leaving the situation that I was in. Not guilty. I dreamt I signed a confession for a murder I didn't commit. In a beaten down state, I no longer cared about living. Execution would be a welcome escape from my bleak lack of self-love. the emptiness and humiliated state. Then an old friend appeared by my desk, reminded me that I was worth loving, that I mattered. She was willing to be my advocate. Hope, self-love reappeared, and my spirit breathed in self-worth. I recanted my confession. I was not guilty of anything, but I gave up hope after all the love was beaten out of me, and it took an old friend to remind me of who I was. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Pat. And I'm glad you had that very, very good friend. I want to thank, we did it. We made it through the whole list. And I just want to give you all a big round of applause for everyone, including our open mic readers. I really want to thank you for joining us in our special uprooting edition of the Poetry Box Live and helping break the silence about domestic and sexual abuse. It's been an honor to host all of you, and I hope this show has helped everyone realize that you are not alone, and there are so many people that truly care and are ready to help you on your healing journey. I'd like to extend to all of you an invitation for our next show next month, which is on Saturday, November 11th. We will be featuring 3 Pacific Northwest poets, Amelia Diaz-Ettinger, Gerald Ramsey, and Karen Gukin, as they launch their brand new poetry books. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. We'll see you next month. And of course, I want to let Jade and Kristin say anything if they'd like to have any closing remarks. Thank you, all of you. You're all beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Exactly. I just want to say thank you to everybody as well, particularly those who contributed to the book and took such a risk, not knowing where it would go, what would happen to it, how it would be received. And without you all, this couldn't have happened. And particularly thank you to Kristin for coming on the journey with me and making this happen, and to Shawn for helping us to manifest this. Thanks.
My pleasure, Jade. Well, I think that's a wrap, everybody. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. I love you all. Good night.
Thank you, Jade.
Yes, thank you, all ladies involved and everybody in your.
Thank you all.
Good night, everyone.